Susan Mackay Smith, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got your, because you've been around RMFW for a long time, we've got your reflections article on the contest. And part of what we're doing on this series is honoring and celebrating the 40 years of Rocky Mountain fiction writers' history. And so we want to talk with you about your reflections on the contest. And we can also talk about some workshops you'll be teaching at the conference coming up. As everybody who's gone to the conference knows, you're one of the most thoughtful and grounded teachers out there, and always
That's nice.
tell
Thank
everybody
you.
I can that you're getting A+ material if you go to one of Susan's workshops. And then also we can talk about Conan the Grammarian and where he is and what he's doing these days. So welcome.
Thank you. And thanks for the nice things you said.
Yeah. So let's start with the contest. First of all, the contest just closed a little while ago, and it's just been being judged this year. I have to ask, were you a judge this year?
I was. I have been forever.
I was about to ask how many years in a row you've judged the contest.
Gosh, at least 20 years.
Wow.
I don't know. I haven't ever counted it up. That would be scary. Hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts.
Yeah. For those who might come across this podcast and not know RMFW's Colorado Gold Contest, could you just give us a quick description of the basic idea of that contest?
Well, I think the basic idea started out to be that whoever was a finalist, would get their work before a professional agent or editor, because the invited editors and agents to the conference in September always judge the finals and select the winner. And so that was really the prize, because back in the day when everything was paper and before there was independent publishing, it could be very, very hard to get in front of, not to get form letter XYZ. Sorry, you don't fit our list at this time. So that was the initial idea, and I still think it's useful because if you have a critique group or a good beta reader, they get used to your work. And so putting your work in front of complete strangers who don't know who you are and have no axe to grind is a valuable thing to do, because it gives you an idea of how real readers are reading your work, what they like, what stops them cold, what you might have room to still work on. So, and it still is all about teaching craft. If you look at, there've been a number of iterations of the score sheet over the years. And if you look at them all, they are an attempt to teach writers the basic elements that belong in fiction, because you can really write well. You can have great style, but writing fiction is different from just ordinary writing. I mean, you have to be able to tell a story, you have to be able to characterize, you have to know when description is just pretty words as opposed to what Hilary Mantel always called it: if you write it correctly, it becomes a character. So the score sheets and the process, I think, really are a very useful teaching tool for beginners, but also for people who just haven't made that leap yet. If they've been submitting and getting back rejection after rejection, it's a very useful tool, I find.
Yeah. And just to emphasize the point that the contest is for unpublished writers, and there've been some little wrinkles in that issue along the way. But we probably won't go into all those discussions. But the main point, Colorado Gold primarily was a leg up potentially for somebody, like you said, who had started their career and started writing, hadn't been published yet. But this was, if you won the contest, a ticket to have a face-to-face interaction with an agent or an editor.
And it has worked that way for, I don't know how many, but a number of writers who maybe they won, maybe they didn't win, but they got interest from the New York pros that way.
Right. Well, I would just completely endorse your take on the score sheet, because I remember way back when, I have no idea what I submitted. Maybe you judged it, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised. But I learned a lot. I mean, I sent in something I thought was really good, and you know, I was so confident, and I think I did place. I know for sure I didn't win, but boy, did I learn a lot from the comments. And I think one year I asked for a critique, which has that critique been a feature since the beginning as well?
Well, since the very beginning, but I do know that as long as I have been judging
Yeah,
these 20 plus years,
yeah.
yes,
So you could pay for just a score sheet, which was pretty thorough, but you could also pay an extra amount of money and get a few pages back, a narrative typed up kind of commentary from the judge, which added additional kind of insight into what you were doing well and what you needed to work on.
correct. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think if I had the time, I would like to write a critique for every manuscript I judge, but of course, that takes forever. And judging a manuscript for me takes, at the minimum, 2 or 3 hours, even without a critique.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, why do you do this? Why keep doing it, Susan?
I think I get a lot out of it. One of the classes I'm teaching this fall at the conference is called Don't Bungle the Beginning. And it's all the lessons I've learned over the years from judging manuscripts. The things not to do, the things that don't work, the things that are hoary cliches. And so I get a lot from it. And sometimes I get inspired to get back to my own writing, either from, oh, I could do so much better than this, or this is really good. I should try to match that.
Yep. How many typically do you judge every year?
It's fewer now than it used to be. I think, how many did I judge? I think it was 10 this year.
Yeah.
I think. Back when Jeanne Stein and I were running the contest, sometimes we would judge 40 because judges would have difficulty with one, or they'd read it before, and the timelines were so tight, plus it was all paper, so you had to mail it back and forth, and that we just would run out of time. So she'd take half of the unread ones and I'd take half of the unread ones. And so that was a lot of work. It absorbed our summers.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the old days with the contest, because you'd get mail and then you have judges and you'd have to send out the packets to the judges. So just that alone was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, and it started usually around February, because you'd be sending out the letters. Will you judge this year? What would you like to judge? How many? And waiting for those people to get back to you, and then collect them all. And then we would have a big, not party, but a big day. Sometimes it took 2 days to assign all the manuscripts, the 2 copies of each one, because each manuscript goes to 2 judges, so that you get a fair balance. Because, you know, I might hate something just because I don't like the subject matter, for example, but the other judge might be able to see past that and say, oh, this is really very well done. And so it's more fair if you get 2 judges. So you had to assign all those and mail them out. Yes, you really haven't lived till you have at least 600 manuscripts piled around your house, because we had 2 copies each. The cutoff was 3 copies each, and the cutoff was 200, but if it was 220, we would take them. And so it was just a nightmare. I mean, the house but Terry Wright did a good job making it electronic. Thank you, Terry.
Yep. I remember that conversion and that discussion. That was a big step forward. Yeah.
It was a big step forward.
Yep. Yep. So what have you noticed over the years in terms of any changes in what gets submitted? I'm wondering if you've noticed anything about what comes in.
It used to be that mystery was the biggest, just huge. these days, I would say that young adult and middle grade far outnumber, and that's across the spectrum, young adult mystery to young adult fantasy, but that is huge these days. Romance has shrunk through the years, which is funny since this was originally a romance organization, but it's always held steady. And I think you'd have to ask the current chairs, but I think it's coming back.
Romance seems very big out there in the public marketplace right now.
Romance is always big out there in the public marketplace.
Yeah.
I mean, I think romance is the largest selling genre and everything else is, a distant second.
Yeah.
And the neat thing is that romance readers read everything. They don't just read romance, but that's their preferred. So if you have a reader who's devouring romances, go thank them because they're also reading your mystery or my fantasy. They're wonderful readers.
Yep, absolutely. They are dedicated readers. They chew through more titles per week than the average just general fiction reader or mystery reader. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they do.
Yep.
And so I kind of always, I get mad when I hear people dissing romance as a genre or dissing romance readers. I get peeved because there's no call for that. The romance writers that you and I both know work as hard on their stuff as we do. Their books are maybe not for everybody, but then neither is a murder mystery or a fantasy. So, and romance readers, I mean, they keep publishing the lives. So stop dissing them, people.
Yeah. Yeah. What else do you think about when you think about the contest over the years?
I think about how much I've learned. I tell people all the time, I may not know how to write a synopsis, but I sure as heck know how not to write a synopsis. And that's purely from reading entries. And I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of wonderful people through contests. I mean, that's how I really had my into RMFW. I was one of those members who sat in the back and never said boo and didn't know anybody, but then I knew my little core of my little critique group. I knew them. After I started judging for Jessica Wolf, I got to know a lot of people, and they're wonderful people. And some of them are dear, dear friends now. And it was my into RMFW, really in. I mean, then after that, after I was contest chair, I was critique chair, then I can't remember. Oh, Jeanne and I and Janet Lane did an anthology, the second anthology. And then I was president.
Yeah.
And that was just so not me, but it was wonderful.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's little portals into the organization, and I feel the same way. My thing was refreshments, carrying refreshments to the workshops. And the next thing I know, I'm organizing the workshops and inviting people to speak and sending out information about what library around the Metro Denver area we'd be having a free monthly workshop, and somebody else was bringing the refreshments, and that became my ticket to the board. And but yeah, it's interesting.
So I'm very grateful to the contest for all those things, for how it's helped my writing, for how it's made me think more deeply about writing in general, but also for giving me this wonderful organization.
Yep. Let's just touch on the synopsis real quick, because that is, I agree with you completely. That is something you can kind of blow off as you're putting your submission together for the contest. But you can tell the ones who have taken some time and they really know what their story is about.
Right. And the other thing I would tell people about the synopsis is, don't tell me about your story. Tell me your story. It's just a different way of telling me your story. So that sounds simple, but it's really not. But just don't strip out all those, and then this happens, and then this happens, or little did she know, but that's about your story. That is not your story.
Yep. Very good.
I think it's easier to write a a slightly longer synopsis, and it used to be too long. Back in the day, I think the synopsis was 5 pages.
Whoa.
And then it got smaller, and now I think maybe it's a little too small for especially beginning writers, because what I got this year was a lot of back of the book jacket blurbs, you know, that kind, not from Stephen King, but this book is about blah blah blah, and they didn't tell you the story. If I were an editor, I would not be able to tell if this person knew how to write a story. They might have a cool concept, but can they bring it to a satisfactory ending?
Right.
So I think maybe it's a little too short right now.
Yeah. Yep. Very good.
But that's
wow.
My personal opinion.
Yeah. Are there any success stories that occur to you, anecdotes from contest winners that really was the beginning of a strong career in publishing fiction?
Well, of course, there was Jessica Wolf. She's the famous one who won the romance category. The agent got together with her and pitched it to an editor who was there at the conference, and they sold it that weekend. And then she went on and wrote several big fat historical romances when those were really in. I don't know if Robert Buettner, who writes military sci-fi, got his editor at our conference, but he won and he was published within the year. And I got the lucky thing of I was supposed to judge his and critique it, and all I could say was, why are you entering contests? Send this out. It's ready. It's good. Send it out now. You know, there was nothing that I could say that was a criticism.
Yeah.
And he was published within the year, and he had a good trilogy. I don't know if he's still publishing now, but I don't read a lot of science fiction anymore.
Yeah. Yep. But it occurs to me that the contest, you know, in some ways, yes, it promises you that introduction to an agent or an editor, and that really just creates a good opportunity for practice, for you to practice that relationship, for you to practice that opening dialogue with a potential acquirer, either the agent or an editor, and that's all good experience for you going forward, no matter if it ends up in a deal or not. That's not so much the point as it is just, this is a professional review by a contest put together by an organization, and you pass through this particular step. Now the prize, so to speak, is a chance for you to really have a serious conversation and see if it meets that next bar as well.
And even if you have an editor or an agent appointment with the judging editor, and you find out they're not really that fond of yours, you can say, well, what could I do to make it more publishable? What could I do that would make it attractive to you? So it was the best of a bad lot, but what can I do? And instead of trying to pitch it to them, pick their brain. They love to help people if you let them. Well, most of them do.
Yeah. Very good. Well, let's talk about, so could you mention a few more things about the workshop that you'll be teaching based on what you learned from all the judging of Colorado Gold, and then also tell us about the second workshop you'll be teaching this coming conference?
Don't bundle the beginning, all the things that you should not do when you're starting a manuscript, or not when you're starting, when you're revising your manuscript. Because I think for most people, the white hot fire of getting that story out is the most important thing. Don't worry about the words. Don't worry that your first 3 chapters aren't necessary. That's for revision. But it's how to make sure you don't have very common, very common errors or mistakes that turn readers off, especially if they're a professional reader. So that's, and it's only an hour, but I think it's got a lot of good content. And then Carol Berg, the multi-time Writer of the Year winner for RMFW and award winner of many other bigger awards. She and I are teaching a class called Tactical Writing, which is it's all the things that you always hear about, but it's a different approach. It's to get you to really think about all these old saws of writing that you're told, show, don't tell. It's how to do it strategically and tactically so that you make your prose the best it can be at whatever level you are. We have taught that before a long time ago. We also, during the pandemic, one of our critique partners moved to New Zealand and got involved with the New Zealand Science Fiction and Fantasy Society. And she had us teach a Zoom lesson on this tactical writing to the New Zealand Fantasy and Science Fiction Society. And that was really fun. There were on Zoom, probably 40, 50 people, little tiny things all over your screen. So it's a good class because it does give you this sort of, I hate to use the expression left field because you just wrote that wonderful baseball book, but
you're welcome to it.
It gives you a look from a different perspective on all these, on how to think about your own writing instead of the typical what you hear all the time. It's the same stuff, but it's just with a different focus and a different drive behind it, I guess. Some of it's pretty basic, as in, for emphasis, the end of a sentence is the place of power. And if you think about these things consciously, the more as you write, it'll come as second nature and you won't have a lot of revision left. But some of it is a lot more complicated, like breaking scenes, why and where and if. So I think there's a lot of meat in this workshop.
Yeah. Give me your quick take on show, don't tell. You hear that bromide all the time, and yet I have yet to pick up a book where there isn't at least a little bit of telling.
Well, my take on show, don't tell is that you have to do both all the time together. But it's more affecting for the reader if you emphasize the show and not the tell. Now, it also comes down to if you're in a transition, so what? Tell. It's quick.
Yeah.
And it's not as important. But show, don't tell, give the reader a little credit. You don't always have to write, he thought. Obviously, if your point of view is strong, who else would be thinking but your protagonist, your point of view? Just little things like that. But it's also precise words that tell the reader what the character is thinking. Not he thought, but the precise words of how he's thinking. Whatever it is that's going on is making him feel and react. So precise word choice, sometimes unusual word choice, sometimes what you omit. But the secret is you really have to show and tell together all the time.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yep, very good. Well, looking forward to conference, absolutely, and hopefully I can get to both of those classes, or at least step in and out, take a few pictures and take a few notes.
I'm looking forward to conference too.
Yeah,
I haven't been for pandemic, so
yeah, I missed last year. I was there the year before, which was an odd year for sure. Yeah. All right. Last topic before we let you go is give us an update on Conan. Where
Conan
is he?
is still there. Conan sometimes misses the column.
Is Conan, am I using the right pronoun? I probably need to check my pronouns with Conan.
I always thought of Conan as a he. In my head, he was a he, just like his cousin, the barbarian.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you got to be careful with pronouns these days, so I'm glad you confirmed I kind of intuited that.
Yeah, I think it was sort of clear. I hope it was anyway.
Yeah.
My alter ego.
Do you
He
miss? Do
still
you miss?
brings me little royalty checks. So
Oh,
that's nice that people are
and
finding it.
are you going to write a column for the RMFW memories about all the Conan columns you wrote for the newsletter?
Nobody's asked me to. I suppose I could, but
You could and should. I mean, he was a fixture.
that seems a little self-serving also. Hi, I wrote this
We-
column by the book.
That's okay. I think it's allowed, especially all that you've given to RMFW, and
Oh,
I'm sure.
RMFW is given to me.
Well,
I mean, that's the way I feel.
yep.
Some of my best friends I met through RMFW.
100%.
I just,
100%.
it's been harder since the pandemic to feel connected, harder because I'm not on Facebook. And so they do a lot of the stuff that used to be in the newsletter and stuff on Facebook, but it's still my group.
Yep. Well, this has been great, Susan. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. And I'm going to surprise you with the last question. If you don't pay attention to the podcast on a regular basis, we always like to wrap up by recommending one book or an author that you've read recently, just to pay it forward a little bit, something to promote and pay it down the line.
Well, I read Mark Stevens' Fireballer, and
you
I love
can't,
baseball books. And so I would recommend that. But a book that I really loved that doesn't need the promotion, Tom Hanks's The Making of Another Major Motion Picture Masterpiece. I loved it.
definitely want to read that book. I really want to read that book a lot. That just sounds amazing.
I was so surprised at how skilled he was. I don't know why that would surprise me, but so I'm blurbing Tom Hanks, I guess. Well,
That's okay. Give us one of your favorite takeaways, just the insights in the industry, or was it just a great story?
what I loved the most was, like any major motion picture masterpiece, it has a cast of thousands. And how he would take the time, because it's kind of a leisurely story, and tell you the whole life of this one character, or how this one character got connected to the movies. And I found that utterly delightful. And he did it very skillfully too, so that I never felt like, oh, come on, let's get back to the story. No,
Yeah.
I never felt like that. I just felt like, oh, now we're finding out about whoever. And
Very good.
I don't think it could be a motion picture, this book. They'd have to strip too much out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Susan, again, thank you. I'll see you in September.
Yes, and thank you for putting up with my spotty internet.
That's all right.